What if I told you there's actually a third installment in the Pathologic series? But no, with all seriousness, as I was diving deeper and deeper into this strange, that is a non-Russian Pathologic fandom, I started to realize that even some of the most hardcore fans never even heard about this beast called Pathologic tabletop game. Which makes sense actually. I'm pretty sure Pathologic owes its biggest surge in popularity outside of Russia to these two beautiful boys, whose videos on it were released during 2019. Well, this thing originally was intended to be a bonus for the bakers, and the crowdfunding campaign took place in 2014. Gosh, is it really 6 years already? Anyway, now that I'm a wildly successful YouTuber, I'm literally drowning in money, but back then, not as much. Remember this picture I briefly showed you in my previous video? Well, let me tell you, 1500 rubles is not a lot, even before the major economic crisis that followed shortly after. Back then, I was in my second year at university, so of course I went for the smallest pledge possible. That would just get me the digital version and nothing else. But then something happened. There is a small store near the place I used to go to lunch that sells all kinds of geeky stuff, and once Pathologic Tabletop got its commercial release, they got one. Like, literally, they got one single copy of the game, and it was absurdly overpriced, and of course they decided to showcase it on the shop window. So, each time I went to grab some noodles or whatever, I've seen it. It was sitting there, teasing me, taunting me each time I walked by. I could feel it getting inside my head, planting the seeds of greed into my soul, patiently waiting for my fear of missing out to kick in. And so I did what any reasonable man would do in my shoes. I went to my mom and asked her for some cash. I bought it, and then of course I shoved it on the top shelf, where it's been collecting dust for years, since who the hell plays tabletop games anyway, am I right? What am I, some sort of loser? Time passed. I graduated from university, found a job and completely forgot about it. Until one day, sometime before I started this whole Schmauder production thing, a guy I was paired up with at work revealed to me that he is BFFs with an owner of my town's oldest and arguably the most famous anti-cafe. What's an anti-cafe? Well, that's a local term used for those places that have seats and tables on them, except instead of serving food and drinks, they rent video games and tabletops. Kinda like those Japanese video game bars, but even more legally questionable. I heard about the place before, I was even invited to it a bunch of times, from which I expertly whistled out. But this time I decided that it is time for me to brush away the dust and finally give this bad boy a chance. Pathologic Tabletop has become something of a rare item, and after I conducted my thorough 12-second research, I've come to a conclusion that this thing got close to zero exposure in the West. And after I took a long and introspective look in the mirror, I have decided that it is my responsibility, nay, my mission to spread the word about this unreasonably expensive box of cardboard cutouts. Especially now that the second edition of it basically fell down from the heavens right into my grabby hands. It's like the universe wants me to do it. So, here's what we're gonna do. We are going to unbox it, we are going to play it, and then I will give you my humble opinion on it. But before we begin, few words on our sponsor. This episode of Schmauder Productions was brought to you by my wallet. But seriously guys, I went a little over my usual budget this time, so please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. Well, enough of that, let's cut this bitch open. This is what it looks like. So far, pretty standard stuff. A rulebook, some cards, character sheets, two kinds of piece stands, few dozen of resource tokens, and the highlight of the entire package. A huge map of the town on Gorkhon that reminds me of one of those playmats we've all seen as kids. When I said it was overpriced when I bought it years ago, I meant it. Usually, with a game with a price tag this high, you can expect some fancy figurines or some better overall quality of components, so this one's kind of underwhelming. The map looks cool, the cards are fine, but this notebook is just garbage. Don't get me wrong, it's a perfectly serviceable tabletop game, but the price to quality ratio could have been more reasonable. I like how each card comes with a bit of flavor text, which are as good as you might expect. Some of those were borrowed from the game with slight edits, but a lot of them are completely original, sometimes even mentioning characters and events not from either one of those. The artwork is great, though it is obvious they were operating on a limited budget. Some cards just feature early concept arts from the remake that barely have anything to do with what the card is supposed to represent. Also, what's with the colors? Blue for Bachelor, orange for Clara? These three have such recognizable color palettes, even someone as dumb as me can replicate them. Wait for it. As I already mentioned, this is the second version of the game and not the one that bakers got. Basically, that's the same exact game but with some slight visual quality of life improvements. Players used to complain that sometimes it's hard to tell characters apart, and people often seem to confuse Burg's and Clara's pieces. So in this version the difference in size and color coding are more pronounced. But honestly, first version was just fine, so if by the end of this video you'll feel like you need one, I'll say grab either one. That is, if you'll somehow manage to find it. And now let's move someplace cozy and play a game or two as I explain how it works, shall we? But before that, allow me to introduce our today's contenders. As the feared and unforgiving Sand Plague, Stanislav. As the mischievous Clara the Changeling, Irina. As the noble and ever-faithful Haruspex, Vlada. And last and also least, yours truly as everyone's favorite town's jester. Pathologic Tabletop is an asymmetrical, semi-cooperative strategy game in which 3 healers will try to defeat the plague. In order to do so, they'll each need to collect 8 evidence points by resolving events before they run out, to then convince the Inquisitor that their method is the right one. But, as you may remember, their methods aren't exactly compatible. Yep, this method of saving the town looks pretty incompatible to me. This is where semi in semi-cooperative comes from. Healers technically share the same goal, but there can only be one winner. As for the plague, its goal is much simpler. Much like in the game it's based on, each healer has a number of special people called Bound, or Ward in this case. And at the start of each game, Plague secretly chooses 3 out of total 9 of them to be its targets. That's 1 from each of the other players. If those 3 people die, the Plague wins. Meaning that, yes, this game is a good old fun for the whole family that not only involves child murder, it makes it a winning condition.
Boss, you killed a child. Amazing, mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss.
And now that the hit list is decided, healers must take turns to position all of their character pieces, but only 1 per district. Every character starts a game in a quarantine, a state that provides them with better protection from the plague, while limiting their abilities, which is indicated by the color of the piece stand facing up. Since this version of the game has only 15 districts and each player has 4 pieces, most of the available space would be occupied. Then the game begins. The game consists of rounds, and rounds consist of turns, 1 for each player. First goes the plague. On its initial turn, plague has to choose its starting location, one of the 3 remaining empty districts, or the steppe. Steppe is considered one big district that only Plague can go to, and since it shares its borders with 7 other districts, it effectively allows Plague to warp around the town to hide its tracks. Pathologic Tabletop has this little mechanic called Secret Unit Deployment in it, meaning that upon choosing a district to start in, Plague doesn't place a game piece in it, it simply doesn't have one. Instead, the player writes down the district's number in a notebook, thus remaining hidden to healers. Then the turn proceeds to them. Their turns have the same structure, so I'll talk about them in general. First phase of healer's turn is setup. If there are less than 4 ongoing events on the map, the player must draw the top card from the events deck and place it in its corresponding district. And based on which healer started the event, it will be determined what resource is needed to resolve it. Plus, during this phase, healers are allowed to use their prescription cards, but only those of the influence type. Don't dwell on this, we will get to them eventually. Next one is the action phase, and this is where things might get a little confusing for the newcomers. Each turn, healer gets 2 actions that they are free to spend on one of the following. Leave the quarantine as themselves or as any of the ward. Move up to 2 spaces as themselves or as any of the ward. Procure any resource as themselves. Transfer a resource as one of the ward to themselves, but only the resource that said ward has a possession of. Use a prescription card of the action type. Seriously, don't dwell on that. And resolve an event as themselves, or any of the ward, but only provided the character is in the same district as said event outside of quarantine, and has a required resource. Also, there's a way to resolve an event as a ward that doesn't have the required resource, but this maneuver is a bit more complicated. In order to do so, the healer must already have a resource on them, then spend an action to transfer it, and then spend another action as the ward to complete it, thus concluding the turn. And no, wards can't store resources on them, meaning that you can't split this action between multiple rounds. Also, resolving an event rewards you with a prescription card of your choice. I'm getting there, okay? However, there is a catch. You can only take one action with one character per turn. This is a fundamental rule that pretty much defines the whole experience. You received a resource you needed for the mission? That's it, better luck next turn. You move the character where you want them to be? Nope, you had enough, now let the others play. This simple rule is what pressures healers to communicate and cooperate, but it is also their biggest weakness, because it gives other players an opportunity to throw a wrench or two into this strategy. To somewhat counteract this inconvenience, healers have the ability to form a pact with any of the ward that's currently located in a district with an active event in it, and has not entered the pact already. This would prevent other players from controlling this character, but this tool needs to be used sparingly, since once the pact is sealed, it cannot be simply broken. You either need to enter a new one, or it would automatically cease to exist if the character dies. Entering a pact isn't considered an action and can be done freely, as long as the requirements are met. Once the healers took their turns, the round concludes and the process is repeated. Except, Plague's subsequent turns are a bit different. First phase is movement. Plague can move one space, which makes it slower than all the human characters. And, once again, its movements, or lack of them if the player so chooses, remain hidden to other players, being only written down in a notebook. Then comes the infection phase. The Plague can choose to declare a district it currently occupies infected. This would of course reveal its location, but it would also kill any and all wards in that district, granted they're not quarantined. Healers, however, cannot die. This attack can only send them back into quarantine. But what if I already figured out Plague's target? What prevents me from keeping that person quarantined indefinitely, I hear you asking? Why, that's a great question actually, thank you. You see, the Plague actually has another attack available that's especially good for killing cowards. Provided it didn't move on the current turn, Plague can announce a blockade by placing a special token into a district it's in. This would trigger all the same effects as infection usually does, killing the wards and sending healers into quarantine. But it would also allow it to seize the blockade on the subsequent turns, which would kill any of the ward, quarantined or not. Blockade can be prolonged for as long as the Plague wants. It is not necessary to seize it on the next turn, just as long as it remains in the same district. It can, however, be interrupted. If, say, there is no longer a reason for it, or maybe the Plague now has some business elsewhere, it can be cancelled, allowing the Plague to proceed with its turn as if it never happened. Blockade is a lone and unwieldy move, but it can be useful for dealing with quarantined wards, if not necessarily by killing them, then by forcing them to move. And if during this phase a ward died or a healer was sent back in quarantine, Plague gets an additional move to flee the scene of the crime. But only one, no circumstances can change that.
Ниже надо было же записать? Или в этой же строке? В этой же. Ниже.
And just so we're clear, no, you can't infect anyone on this turn after that move. So yeah, no 360 no-scope multi-kills there. Then comes the final phase of Plague's turn, called Strains. Plague starts a game with one random strain card and gets one each time an event appears on the map. And during this phase, Plague can place those cards face down at any of the districts it visited. Strains are, well, their minds, okay? They sit patiently until somebody enters or makes an action in said district, which triggers its effects immediately. The effects are unpleasant. They vary from mildly annoying to downright evil, so it's best not to trigger them unless it is absolutely necessary. And if Plague plays its cards right, pun intended, there certainly will be such moments. The town on Gorhan is a small place, and there is only so much space to move around. Oh, and just to clarify, it is not necessary to reveal the vector of Plague's movement by placing strains in the same order the districts were visited. Throw them around however you want. Healers get 1 evidence point for resolving an event as themselves or as any other healer's ward, or 2 for doing it as one of their own. So it's both riskier and more rewarding that way. Every healer starts with 3 points of evidence, 1 for each ward, and loses them if said ward dies. As a little consolation prize, the healer whose ward beat the dust gets a prescription card. Yeah, prescription cards. They are special abilities specific to each healer. There are 10 of them in each of the 3 decks, some of them are recurring, some are unique, but all of them are one-time use only. Those cards are the only real difference between the characters. In all other respects, playing as Bachelor is no different to playing as Clara. But honestly, I think it's more than enough. The prescriptions are actually doing a great job at showcasing their distinctions. The Bachelor can go all bossy on everyone, locking up districts left and right, giving orders and being a general nuisance for others. You know, your usual benefits of having friends in high places. The Haruspix, on the other hand, is all about getting shit done. He is better at procuring resources, he is the only one who's able to break the one action per character rule with limitations. Plus, he has this really cool ability to read the future, the Act of Haruspicy, which allows him, or her, to take a sneak peek at the 3 upcoming events, and even rearrange them if needed. The Changeling is, well, she's Changeling. She has direct ties to the Plague, so her abilities are fittingly meta and mysterious. Save someone from a certain death, stop the Plague from spreading, learn something you shouldn't. That sort of thing. And on top of that, she is good at hindering the other 2 dorks if they misbehave. As always. Caps Lock Games, the developers of Pathologic Tabletop, managed to strike a fine balance with this mechanic. Most of the cards can be used both offensively and defensively, both to help others and for more selfish goals. Haruspix, for example, is unmatched when it comes to speedy evacuations, being able to do 2 actions with 1 character, but can also be used for some rather unexpected moves to snatch an event from under someone's nose. Or let's look at Bachelor's
curfew.
Declaring 1 prohibits everyone from entering or leaving the targeted district. I often play as him, and I can tell you that some of my
curfews
were a calculated decision made by all 3 healers to buy us some time, while others resulted in death threats. This duality means that the game allows for some intricate strategies as much as some dirty backstabbing, which makes it all the more exciting. As I already mentioned, these prescriptions come in different types. Reactions are contextually activated, influence type can be used at any time, and actions are, well, actions with all the nuances this normally implies. And I barely even talked about the events. Each of the 15 available events has its own special conditions that can influence the flow of the game. Some of those are active for as long as the event remains present, some activate immediately upon appearing or upon being resolved, and some come with the catch. And they really do feel like events. Like things that happen to this town during epidemic. Sometimes they can be convenient, but other times they can be straight up catastrophic. Let's look at this one, the House of the Living. We all know and love this one, right? When it appears, it forces healers to donate a resource to it, and then whoever resolves it gets the whole stash. Once something like this gets on the table, each healer should do their best to resolve it before others could, which stands in contrast with something like this. This one is a disaster. Fires drown thousands of rats on the streets, which allows Plague to move up to 2 districts each turn, for as long as this event is present. Which, paired up with its ability to step teleport, can lead to a massacre. With something like this, it's in everyone's best interest to join forces and make the bad thing go away ASAP, even if that means giving up those precious evidence points. But then again, it's up to each individual player to decide exactly how egoistic they will be. Speaking of that, a bit of a warning. Every once in a while, some smartass I'm playing with will give everyone this speech about how it's not important who wins as long as the Plague is defeated, and everyone must get together to save the humanity and blah blah blah. Remember, it is your sacred duty as the owner of the game to politely yet firmly remind such a player that this is not how it works. Bachelor is as much of an opponent to Haruspix as Plague is, and if healers would start treating Pathologic Tabletop as a 3v1 game, it breaks. It simply isn't balanced for that, so make sure everyone understands it. And speaking of events, thing that kinda brings this game down for me is a relatively poor replayability. As I already told you, there are only 15 events, and each one is tied to its district. So don't be too surprised to see strains appearing around 12 districts for no reason, if you are playing against experienced Plague. Actually, before this I was working on a homebrew add-on to solve this problem, so let me know if it's something you want to see in the future. Okay, I gotta be honest with you, I am not a big fan of tabletop games. Before 2019, when my colleague bullied me into visiting this anti-cafe, I think I played maybe 5 of them tops. So I don't exactly have a degree at rating board games. However, sometime before this pandemic, we had a thematic evening there dedicated solely to games with this secret unit deployment feature, and I managed to play a whole bunch of them. Meaning I have at least some frame of reference here, and honestly, in my opinion, Pathologic holds up. It holds up pretty well actually. So, okay, this is the part where I'm sort of going to take a jab at the crowd of nice people who accepted me and with whom I had a great time. And I'm already hating myself, but the thing I've noticed about board game enthusiasts is that they often confuse complexity with cleverness. The more bullshit rules, the more types of everything the game has, the better, right? If normies can't get into it, then it's gotta be for smart people. Like, just look at this. What is all of this? What is this for? What are these? Oh god, why is there so many cities? Wait, what do you mean? There is combat here too? I remember playing a game of this and we spent 40 minutes looking for Dracula on the wrong side of the fucking continent. It was clear that even people who were actually pumped up about playing this thing weren't having fun. It was a chore. Turn after turn, we were just dealing with low-level monsters, shuffling the cards around, while the guy playing as Dracula was sitting in the corner with a face like this. And I thought to myself, well, at least he is having the time of his life. And you know me, right? You know how I feel about this kind of game design. Remember that Skyrim comparison? Holy shit, it was dumb. Well, once again, Pathologic is on the opposite side of this spectrum. Okay, admittedly, this stuff is kinda hard to explain to new players, but other than that, this game has a really damn elegant design that leaves for little to no downtime. Because, you know, the clock is ticking. And the plague is encouraged to make its first move as soon as possible. And once that happens, healers can already start making some educated guesses about its location and intentions. After all, there are only so many districts it could have run off to. As for who you should play it with, you know how some board games are basically a social lubricant, just a fun leeway activity that you shouldn't really pay all that much attention to and just enjoy your time with friends. Well, this isn't the one, Chief. And it's time for one of my signature personal anecdotes again. There is this regular in that anti-cafe, and I am not going to mention his name, so let's just give him a completely random one, just as a placeholder. Let's call him Daniil. Daniil is a huge nerd, and that's coming from me. This dude is the saltiest, sweatiest, the most obnoxiously competitive human being I had the pleasure to make an acquaintance with. He plays to win, like, all the time. I guess one can say that he is used to winning. I try to avoid Daniil. There are usually at least 2 or more games being played at the same time, so it's not much of a problem, but these ones we just had no choice. We were 1 player short, so we brought him in to play as the Plague, and it was a blast. This fucking guy is pure evil. He was playing us like a damn fiddle. He was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Each time it was our time to make moves, it all turned into a long and heated discussion. We argued, we speculated, we desperately evacuated people we thought he's about to strike, only for him to reveal to us that he's actually on the opposite side of the town, as the death toll grew. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved that he's getting his kick of owning people at tabletops and not ruling some country or some shit. He pressured us into having an authentic pathologic experience, and I loved him for that. Seriously, after that game, I begged him to play as the Plague again, each time I met him.
So, are we friends now?
Ew, no, go away. The conclusion here is this. Your pathologic tabletop impression would be as good as the person playing as Plague. I, for instance, suck at it. My intentions are always as clear as day, and my poker face is just non-existent. So, if you have the game on your hands, and you just happen to know a devil incarnate, we, here at Schmauder Productions HQ, strongly recommend you to invite them over. Just don't tell me I haven't warned you. But what if I don't have 3 friends? Is there a way for me to enjoy this masterpiece? Well, the additional rules section actually provides you with a way to play it with a party of 3 people, with some crutches, but I can't say I recommend it. The dual version, however, in this variation, one player takes a role of a Plague. No surprises here. While the other becomes this weird amalgamation of the 3 healers. And it can be quite interesting. The rules for the most part remained unchanged, except the prescription deck the healer gets would consist of various cards from all 3. The repeating cards, to be precise. The ultimates, as I like to call them, would have to be left out. I don't know if it's the lack of tension between the healers or the flexibility of the prescription deck, but this mode, as fun as it is, feels somewhat unbalanced in favor of Bachiharu spelling. To wrap things up, I think Pathologic Tabletop is a decent game that deserves more attention. And it works even better when you look at it as a translation of the source material for a different medium. The character quirks, the constant need to be in two places at once, the time pressure, it all feels distinctly pathological. Even the little things, like what resource each healer starts with, was accounted for. And this is just not something you often get with this. So you're going to tell me this game based on Bloodborne doesn't even have frenzy mechanic in it, and is basically just Munchkin with soul cleavers? It's like you're trying to disappoint me. But this one actually feels like a cool way to reenact the familiar story in a new and fun way, and I don't regret the money I spent on it. Oh wait, I forgot to mention it. This game comes with a soundtrack. Like, literally one track of sound that is 54 minutes long. Let's give it a listen, shall we? And that concludes my series of videos on Pathologic. I hope you enjoyed. If I had to say one good thing about myself here, it's got to be that I did a pretty good job establishing my range. Some pseudo-intellectual crap here, a review there, and some live-action shenanigans on top. Please let me know what you think in the comments, stick around for more of that, and maybe consider supporting me on Patreon. See ya! Like this video, subscribe to my stuff, or Lady Haruspix will find you and stab you in the dick.